Today, I'm going to take you through a watercolor drawing of early autumn in Yosemite. We're going to start off with gray. This one is called Gunmetal. I just want something neutral to block in the scene, and I'm going to start laying down some light marks. This will become part of the painting as well, since all of these pencils are watercolor pencils. They will all dissolve down beautifully when water is added to them. Right now I'm just blocking in the scene, so I'm laying out where I want the mountain to be, and then where I want the pine trees to be, as well as the outline of the lake. And now I'm adding some taller pine trees along the left side. Adding a little bit of a rounded tree just below these pine trees. Gives it a little variation, and now I'm drawing out the shoreline. And in the center, there's going to be a pond. I'm very excited about the reflection in the pond. That's always my favorite part. I'm using the color golden brown, which I will show you in a second here, to add in some leaves and some accents along some of the trees. Some of the pine trees are this golden yellow color. I believe there's a different name for them. I don't know what that is, but if you know, by all means, let me know in the comments. Now I'm using the deep cadmium. This is a little bit brighter yellow than that golden brown we just laid down. This is the olive green. And I want to start blocking out where I want the trees, where I want them to have their little piney needles. And I think that I will go darker than this, but since it is easier to go from light to dark than from dark to light in watercolor, I want to start with a lighter color than what I think I will end up using at the end. This is the mineral green, and it has more of a blue undertone to it than the olive green. The olive green has more of a yellow undertone. I'm using this so that this tree stands out from the evergreens. And now I'm picking up May green, which has a yellow undertone to it, and it's quite a bit brighter than the olive green. I want to use this for some of the trees that are closer to the foreground to add a little bit of variety in there. And we are back to olive green now for the trees that are a little bit further back and taller. Those will be a little bit darker as they move back into the distance away from the viewer. And then after I put a little bit more detail in here, I'm going to pick up the blue-gray and use this for the lake. I'm going to use this for part of the reflection in the lake, so I'm laying it down a little heavier where I want the reflection from the trees to be. And then I'm going to pick up the ivory black. I'm going to use that over the reflections as well, just because it'll add a bit more depth. That blue would be a bit too saturated otherwise for what I'm looking for. We are back to the gray, and with a light hand, I'm going to run this over the sky. I'm not putting too much detail in the sky, I just want to imply that it's a bit overcast. I'm not worried about putting in any clouds. Now we are on to brown ochre, and this is kind of a yellowish brown. I want to use that to start putting in some of the detail along the mountain. I'm focusing mostly along the edge and then the face of the mountain where the sun would be hitting it. I want to keep that nice and warm. Here I'm picking up the gray again, so I'm going to scatter different tones over the mountain because you'll get different colors coming through on the rock, and I want to express that here as well. Now we are back to golden brown, and I'm going to add a little bit more detail along the bank just to imply sand and rock. And I'm going back to the brown ochre to add a different tone of the sand and the rock. And now I'm picking up the size 8 brush, and I'm going to dip it in water, and starting at the top, I'm going over the sky first and just getting that pencil wet. You'll see it dissolves down so easily and starts to blend together. You can really achieve a lot of different looks with these pencils. If you want to blend them all the way out completely, where it just looks like traditional watercolor, you can do that. If you like to leave a little bit of the pencil mark showing, you can do that as well. I use them both ways, and in this painting, I decided to leave a little bit of the pencil marks showing just because it gives it a little bit more of a rustic, slightly rougher texture almost to the paper, and I liked that for this particular painting. I'm dipping the brush both to add more water back to the brush and also in between some of the colors. Particularly when I'm going over a lighter color, I like to clean off the brush so that the darker colors don't drag into the lighter colors. I want to keep those lighter colors nice and clear. The paper that you use for this will make a difference. If you are someone who likes to add a lot of layers to your work and wet it down and dry it and wet it down again and maybe go in there and scrub it a little bit, it's really helpful to have 100% cotton paper. I'm using a 5 by 7 piece of Arches 140-pound paper in this video. You don't have to use this particular brand. There are loads of options for 100% cotton paper. That is the main thing that you want to be looking for. I would stay away from pulp-based paper. That tends to, it just doesn't handle the watercolor quite as well and can be kind of frustrating, especially if you're just starting out and trying to get a handle on the materials. At this stage, I'm just looking over the painting to make sure that I've blended over any of the pencil that I laid down initially. And then once I've completed that, I'm going to come back in with my little mini hair dryer and just dry this off and start blowing pencils around my workspace. And I want this to be completely dry so that I can come back in with more pencil and add more detail. The first thing I want to do is add a little bit more color into the lake. It would be picking up a lot of color in the reflections from what's around it, so you'll see me run through a few different colors here, from the green to the gray to the brown, and then I'm picking up the brush and I'm going to come in and get those damp so that I can see how that looks. I'm going to let that air dry for right now, and I'm going to deepen the pine trees quite a bit. I want those to be a lot darker. I'm using the black right here and going over the trees. I'm not completely covering the olive green that I laid down initially. That way you'll be able to see both the black and the green. And I'm continuing that over on the right. I'm being a little bit more careful over on the right side. I want to go around the yellow and the brighter green that I laid down earlier. I'm implying branches, but keeping it looser, more impressionist style. I'm not too worried about being hyper realistic here. I'm coming back in with some green, the olive green specifically, and then I'm picking up Copper Beach. Love the name of that pencil. And this is more of a brown. I'm going to continue to use that to darken the trees, but it's a little bit different from the black because this will give it more warmth. I want a nice blending of the colors when I come back in with the brush and add water to all of these. I'm varying the heights of the trees to add some visual interest there. The mountain dips back down below the trees, and I want to make sure that the trees are all varying heights, which helps add visual interest. I'm also going to scatter some of these darker colors down along the shoreline. That helps create a natural break between the trees and the sandy, rocky beach. When I come back in with the color, you'll see just how much of a dramatic difference this makes. These are quite a bit darker. I'm loving how this is looking. And this is also why I didn't start with the dark color to begin with. It would have looked really harsh at the beginning and possibly a little too intense, so it can help to build the painting up in layers. You want to make sure that you have enough water on your brush to be dissolving the pigment from the pencils, but not so much that it's creating any pooling on your paper. If your paper is damp, you can also come back in with the pencil and add more pigment onto damp paper. That can be a really fun effect to try, especially if you're using these for the first time. It's a great way to experiment with them and just see how they behave. I'm doing the same thing on the left as I did over on the right, just adding a bit more dark color and rotating between the greens and the brown and the black. I'm going to widen this tree out quite a bit. It's a little more in the foreground than the trees over on the right. And I've got this nice little skinny bottle brush tree. You can see that right now it looks like that tree tucks behind the mountain, but in reality, it would actually be out in front of the mountain. So I'm going to come back in and extend the darker color of the little bottle brush tree. I'm going to extend that out over in front of the mountain so that visually you see the tree first, and then the mountain is beyond that. And now I'm darkening up the shoreline. As you start adding more intensity to your colors, you'll see that you'll want to adjust other areas in your painting. It's like getting a new piece of furniture for your house, and then you start looking around at all of your existing furniture and realizing that you want all of it to be new. So I want all of these colors to be a lot more intensified. This is also somewhat personal preference. I really love high contrast in my paintings, and if you like that too, this type of painting probably appeals to you. If you prefer lighter contrast, you can control that by not using as much pressure on the pencils and choosing to use lighter hues. And you can achieve the same layout, and it'll just have a lighter, more ethereal, atmospheric look to it. I extended the reflections into the lake a little bit more so that it looks as if the reflection is picking up the very tops of those treetops. If you like the idea of keeping the focus on the trees, you could stop at this point. I also want there to be some emphasis on the mountain, so I'm going to intensify the colors on that a little bit. I'm still going to keep the tones in the mid-value range. If you think of value as being a scale of 0 to 10 from darkest to lightest, I want the mountain to be somewhere in the middle of that range. And then the trees are the darkest, and we'll contrast with that as well as contrasting with the sky and the very center of the lake, which are the very lightest values. If you ever look at your paintings and think that they need to have a little more life or a little bit more pop to them, a lot of times you can achieve that by either darkening some of your values or lightening some of your values. Lightening values on watercolor is very tricky because you need to use the paper to do that unless you plan to come back in with either a light colored gouache or even acrylic. Could go over watercolor, but darkening values can really create nice contrast and really brings a painting to life. Right now, I'm just thinking about little details, and I want to have a little bit more of the rock definition on the mountain. And I'm using more jagged edges here to imply the jaggedness of the rock and that granite face. And then I'm coming back in with the water to soften that up a little bit, blend it out, and see how that looks. I wanted to add a little bit more, I'm not even sure what that would be called on the mountain, that very top. It's really distinctive in Yosemite. It has a very distinct curve to it, Whenever you're painting something that is a distinctive place or well-known place, you want to make sure that you've got the most defining characteristic recognizable to the viewer. Once I reach the end of a painting, I find it helpful to sometimes get up and move away from the painting, look at it from further away. I'll oftentimes see areas where I want to add a little bit more detail, which was the case here. After I got this dry with the blow dryer, I came back in with the black and added just a little bit more definition to the rock face. I'm just scattering little bits throughout here just to darken it very, very slightly in different areas so it gives you the impression of rock. At this point, I am happy with how the painting looks, so I'm going to remove the washi tape from the paper. This is always my favorite part. And then I'm going to use a Micron ink pen. This is archival. It's also waterproof in case you're like me and you decide to come back in and change anything about your painting later. It won't interfere with that ink. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are looking for other watercolor inspiration, I have lots of videos on my channel. I'll see you in the next one.